Hello YouTube, welcome to Codified Lounge. My name is Gaurang and in this video we are going to talk about HTML. This video is a part of Web Development Fundamental series, which is a beginner friendly guide to web development. So if you're interested, there's a link in the description to check out the series from the beginning. And for those who have been following this series, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wait a minute, didn't we promise CSS in this video? Want you talking about adding animations and beautifying the web page in this video? And I know I did. But while preparing for that, I realized that hey, there are some more HTML basics that I wanted to cover so that it's easier for me to explain CSS over here. So that's why we are going to cover more HTML. This is going to be a short video, and in next video I promise we are going to start with cascading style sheets. So without any further delays, let's get started. So if you remember in the previous episode, what we did was we created this index.html with all the HTML elements. We created details HTML with all the HTML form elements. And we also had a hello world application to start development, right? So we'll continue this example and we'll add a new file here. We'll call it, okay, let me make sure I add it in the right place. Yes. And we'll call it fancy inputs.html, right? And the reason I'm calling it fancy inputs.html is, well, they're a little bit fancier than the original inputs that we saw, but they are relatively newer to HTML standard, and not all browsers support them completely. So whenever you are using these elements, just make sure you check out the browser compatibility, and I'll also show you where to do that before using it. So you might want to, if let's say your end users only use Chrome latest versions, then you are good. But let's say your end user might be using Firefox or Internet Explorer or Edge, right? So these elements might differ in behavior in these browsers, and depending on the elements, some browsers might not even support these elements, right? So always make sure you check the browser compatibility, and always make sure you have cross-browser support whenever you are building any web application. So let's get started. Let's just use the default. Let's just create this default HTML tags over here. We are going to name. We are not going to give a fancy HTML. Input title. And since we are talking about input elements, right, we want to create these elements around a form. So if you remember, HTML elements have many HTML elements have opening bracket, element name, closing bracket, and same way a closing tag for that element. So we created that. If you remember, we covered form elements last time. Basically, form element nests all the input elements that HTML supports, so that when the user clicks on submit, we can submit the whole form. So this is our form element. We can also give it an ID, fancy inputs, right? Just remember, we are not using ID right now, but whenever we add any whenever we add any JavaScript to it, or even CSS, which we are going to cover in next video. Whenever we do that, we will be able to use these ID values to target which HTML element to apply a style to, or which HTML element would trigger some JavaScript code, right? So ID, and let's get started with the first one. The first one is, again, it's input, but remember in the type we used to give different types. It was text, it was password. So here we'll say the type is color, right? ID, we would say my favorite color, and name, again same thing, my favorite color. And what we learned is I cannot type things, right? Let's make sure we close this, right? Oops, I need to start the server. If you remember, we had added this go live server in the bottom, right? So we are going to use that. We are going to click on go live, and it launches it, and it launches on a different screen. I'm going to drag it over here for you. So what this input did was, so it gives this, it renders this input element with a color picker, and the default value is black. So if you open it, it allows you to select all the different colors you want. You can drag this left and right to create any base color and then change the shade. And if you see over here, this guy RGB, this stands for red, green and blue. So whenever you are dragging your color picker thingy over here, it changes the value of red, green and blue. So basically it says this amount of red, this amount of green, this amount of blue makes this color for you. Kind of rhymed, right? This amount of red, this amount of green, this amount of blue make this color for you. Awesome. So not just RGB users, we can also select based on HSL. HSL stands for hue, saturation and light. Again, it's just a different representation of the same color. And the third one is hex codes, right? These hex code colors are something that we use a lot in HTML and CSS development. So this string basically represents the colors you are like. For the same color, all these values can be different, but they still represent the same color, right? Now let me refresh this again. So as you can see, if you don't select any of the colors, the default value is black. Let's say we want to change this. How can we do that? So we add another attribute, say value, and we add a color. So let's just randomly select one. Oops. So the hex code always, so the value is always in hex code, and hex code always starts with a hash sign. And you can say EC, right? So basically each letter over here is a hex value from 0 to F, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F, right? Those are the A, B, C, D, E, F. Yeah, those are the hex codes. And explaining what hex codes are and how they work is a little bit out of scope, but I'll share a link with you if you want to learn more about HTML colors. Again, this link is in the description. This time I have not forgotten this, so you can go through it. You can go through all the color libraries, what colors are there, what are the different hex code for these, right? Okay, so this I selected somewhat gray shade. Let's see something that we understand. Let's say we select red. So this is ED0C0C. Let's try that. ED0C0C. Now if you see, the default color is red. Let's also make this more presentable, right? So let's add a label. If you remember, labels, basically we need labels to first of all make our forms more presentable, user-friendly, and also for accessibility. Whenever we add a label, people who use screen readers, these label speak out what the input is for these users when they click on it, so they know what to choose here. So let's say label, let's say we are making a superhero input form. So let's say the label is pick your theme color, right? Every superhero needs a theme for, and we are going to say this label is for let's make this name theme color so that it makes sense. Add some more context here over here. So this label is for this thing. Pick your theme color. Okay, makes sense, right? So next we are going to add a different kind of input. So let's see input, and again same thing, type, and this time we are going to collect date time. Let's say we are creating this form to let superheroes sign up for Avengers Initiative. Okay, this is fun. I like something like this. So we'll call it datetime local. Okay, again close it. Did I misspell label before? Yes, I did. Okay, see, the thing about HTML is it doesn't throw an error when you misspell something or when you use the wrong attributes. Even if you open the developer tag over here, let's say I do it again. Let's say I do this. If you refresh this, there are no errors or nothing. HTML just ignores that element and renders whatever it can render over there, right? See, even here it is misspelled, so it will just render the pick your color thing. It won't work as expected, at least for the screen readers, but it won't throw you an error. Let's fix this. Okay, label. And I didn't add. Why can't I type? Okay, I didn't add, right? And let's say let's call it and also give the same name over here. So as you might have already guessed, right, our input is of type date time local. So what would it do? It would create this widget, input widget, to allow users to select date time in their local time zone. So let's see how it looks. There you go. Let me close the developer tools. If you see over here, we have our label and it creates this input with default date time already, not default, but something already filled. So if you see here, it says the date format, it's year, month, date, and then the empty time. The time format is hour, minutes, and maybe AM, PM. So how does this work, right? So you can type here, you can say 2022, 2022, 03, 20, and let's say 05:23 PM, right? You can also type that as any input and it automatically formats it, or let's refresh, or you can click on this and it opens this date time widget for you, and then you can select any date you want and you can say okay, yeah, right? So I'm available at this time for audition. You can directly click on today and it sets the date to today, right? But let's fix this UI, right? There's no space, so let's add one more line break. Okay, looks good. But let's say we want to limit this. We want to say you can only pick audition date in future, because right now if you see, I can go here, I can go to 2017 February 12th 8 AM. I can also select this. I can also select a date in past. So unless I'm a superhero that can time travel, it's useless, right? So let's do that. Let's add some more attributes to fix this. We're going to format this. Okay, speaking of formatting, I'll show you one more quick trick. So if you're using VS Code, you can press Ctrl, Shift, and P, and VS Code opens this command palette for you. Okay, so you can then type format document, which basically does is it whatever document you are editing, it formats it in a way that's more easier to read, and also it formats it in a way that is like a industry best practice. So especially when it comes to JavaScript, formatting really helps indenting all the code, and it makes it very readable, easier to maintain, and especially when you are in an environment where there are multiple developers there. So you type format, you select format document and click enter, and see it formatted the code and it's a lot readable than before, right? So once you format that, we can add two tags, min and max. So what that does is min tells us the minimum date and max tells us the maximum date. So let's say minimum date, let's say I started doing this today, right? I mean, I want to audition today. So I'll say, if you remember, the format was year, month, date. So let's do that. Minimum date is 2022/03/20, right? And then we'll say T, which splits the date and time, and then the time. Let's say we want to start auditioning this morning. So 08:30. Now if you see, if you refresh the page, this looks as it is. But if you select, now you cannot select any dates before today's date, right? And let's try selecting a time before today. Let's see what happens. Oh, I need to submit the form to do that. So let's try that out. BR. Let's add 2 BRs. Again, BRs are line breaks. This is not the recommended way to add line breaks, but since we have not covered CSS, we are going to just use this. We are going to add input. And can you guess what type of input it is? Type submit value book my audition, right? So now again, let's go, let's select, okay, 5:30, and see, since we said that we want the minimum value is today's date and 8:30 a.m., you cannot select anything before 8:30. The widget itself blocks you from doing that. But like I said, the browser support for this widgets is not up to the mark. So not up to, but not all browser supports all the features. So you want to check before confirming that, hey, before releasing to production, saying, hey, is this supported? Will the feature work as expected in all the browsers? So let's check. Let's see how do we confirm that. So for example, let's say we used a color picker earlier, and if you see the browser compatibility, again, this link is in the description for MDN docs, but if you see browser compatibility, it says, hey, Firefox does not support couple of features in color picker. It doesn't support list and autocomplete. Then let me zoom this in. Oopsie daisies. Yeah. See, it says some things are not supported, right? So let's say date time local. So date time local is okay. It looks like it's supported everywhere except IE. I mean, who cares about IE now? We have Edge. So this looks like this feature is quite well developed. So you can use this features as it is. You can also expect that all browsers will render this error if someone tries to select an older time. So let's fix the time. Let's say 9:30. So there you go. Form was submitted. That's why everything reset to its default values. And the minimum value worked. Let's say we also want to limit the users to audition. Let's say we are holding auditions for 3 days, right? So we can do this. We can say max value, right? 20, 22, 03, let's say 25, and till 5:30. So when we say 5:30, how would it know whether we are talking about 5:30 a.m. or p.m.? So one way to do that is to use the 24-hour format. So we can say 17:30, right? Refresh, right? So, oops, something went wrong here. Oh, okay. Yeah, because we have a 5-day limit, right? And we are not changing the month. It pre-filled the year and the month for us because this never changes, right? So now if you click on this, only 5 days of this widget are enabled. So you can select anything till 5 or 6. You can select anything till 25th of this month. And now same thing. Let's select 9:30 p.m. right? This is again above more than our range, and it would say the value must be 5:30 p.m. or earlier, right? So it also validates this input for us, which is super cool. You'll know more about validation as we go jump into JavaScript, but now someone can set time as 3:30 a.m. right? Oh, I selected the wrong value over here. 25, 3:30 a.m. That worked, but that's why we need validation. Like maybe we want every day users to select time every day between 8 to 5 only, right? So one way to do that is using validations in JavaScript, which we will cover in next videos. Other way to do that is to break this down into multiple HTML elements, which we'll explore next. So here we selected date time local, right? Worked as expected. But let's say we want to break this down, right? So let's create another input. HTML allows us to select only date, right? And I'll name it ID. Let me rename this to date time so that again it aligns with what our element is, and I can reuse date over here. So I'll say ID audition date, right? And we'll also add a label for it. In this case, we are not, since the type is only date, we are not collecting time, we are just collecting date over here. And we'll say, hey, this label is for audition date. Let's keep the message same. Let's clarify this. Our superheroes can be very confusing sometimes. Let's make sure we have all the line breaks in place. Again, line breaks, this tag is not the right way to add line breaks, but we'll work with this for now. Let's see our HTML page. Pick your audition date. We have a similar looking widget. Again, the same date format. Now if you open this, it doesn't have the time part of the widget, so you can simply select just the date for you. So it would be interesting practice for you. If you create this HTML page, make sure you open it in different browsers. Different browsers will render this widget very differently. Also, especially mobile web browsers. If you render it in mobile web browsers, it will be different. It will end up using the native date picker in some cases. So as you can see, we can just select the date over here. But right now, again, we can select any date in the past. So let's fix that. Let's add minimum date over here as well. Again, we can use our shortcut format document, Control Shift P and format document. And we'll add another attribute over here called min, which says minimum date. Again, it's similar to what we did for date time, 2022-03-20, right? That's the date of the recording. If you refresh, right, we'll see nothing has changed over here. But if you open this, now we can only select any date starting from today, right? But nothing before that. Another interesting thing is you can also clear this values. Again, all this support is by default in the widget, but this is how you add the min. Let's add max. 2022-03, what was that? 25, right? So since it's just date widget, we are not adding time in the min and max values. If you refresh, now if you see here, because it has pre-filled these values, the date part, like the day part of it, is clipped. We can fix this using CSS. I don't want to add that right now to confuse you, but if this is easily fixable when you add CSS to it. But for now, let's just go this and see. Our widget now just allows us to select 6 dates till 25th of this month. Nothing after that, right? So works as expected. But now what about time, right? So since we are splitting this, let's create another input element for time. Input type. Can you guess type? Time. We'll just ideate audition underscore time, name audition underscore time, and that's it, right? Again, let's format it. Control Shift P, format document. Looks beautiful. See, we did forget adding name to audition date, and that's why the formatting comes in handy. It organizes the code in a way that you can look for patterns and you'll know what's missing where. So here we'll just add audition time, audition date, right? And we'll also add label for this guy. So let's say this label is for audition time. Let's change the message saying pick your audition time. Okay, now, so you see, again, it's a similar widget, right? But it's a little bit different. It has this clock icon instead of calendar icon, and it's hour, minutes, and then AM or PM. You click on this and it shows you this kind of a drop down, right? You can select any time, you can do AM or PM, right? Let's let's limit this time because we don't want to work 24 hours. So let's go back to our input. You might have already guessed the attributes we are going to add, but let's repeat for practice. Let's say min, right? And since it's time, we don't have to add any split or anything. We can just say 0830, right? From morning 8:30 to max 17:30 to evening 5:30. If you refresh the page, you click on this, you say, let's say I want to come and audition at 3:45 a.m. You try to submit, it'll be like, oh, wait a minute. You need to come between office hours. And then I'll be like, okay. We can control superheroes. See, it got submitted. So this is how we can change the UI for our business logic as well. Like I said earlier, when we were picking date time, you can't validate or limit the time there. But here now we can say, hey, this is the date and this is the time. You can split the widgets, and then you can restrict the time no matter what the date is, right? So you saw, right? I was able to submit the form even with the blank values. So ideally, you don't want to do that. You want to limit. I mean, you want to validate and force users to enter the required fields, right? So how do you do that? So again, this is again part of validation, which we'll cover in JavaScript, but HTML also supports some attributes for that, right? The first of all is the attribute called required. So it's a Boolean attribute. So if you remember from the last video, Boolean attributes are attributes where we don't need to enter any value. If the attribute is present, that means it's treated as true. True means this field is required, right? So let's add required to all these fields, right? Oops. Required. Let's refresh, click this and say, hey, please fill out this field. So now our superheroes will have to fill in this field, will have to select available date time, right? So that's how you can force users to not submit the form without filling in details. Again, we have to do this even in JavaScript, and we also have to validate on the server, but I'll talk more about it in detail as we go. So we added date time, we added date, we added time. Let's add another input. Let's say we also want to know our superhero Sunshine. I'm just making stuff up here. So we'll just ask them their birth month, right? Please enter your birth month. And I felt this ridiculous, and we'll say this is of input time month, right? ID, birth month, name, birth month, right? Again, Control Shift P, format document. Looks good. No, it doesn't. We didn't say birth month for. Now it looks good. Let's go back to this. Okay, let's add line breaks for clarity. Okay, please enter your birth month, right? So again, see, it already has some placeholder text, right, formatted. Let's select it and see how it goes. So in this case, along with month, you can also select the year, right? Which makes sense. Just selecting a month, it doesn't give you any value, right? You want, normally whenever you are collecting month from your user, you also want year to it in most cases. So month and year, right? And you can go to this month, it defaults it to March, right? Let's add some more validations. It's similar to what we saw earlier. So we'll add min. We only want to hire, let's say, superheroes that were born in between second half of the year let's say last year. So we can say min, and this is where it's different from all the others. We have to say min 2021 dash and the month. So let's say 06, right? So let's check that out. Let's refresh. If you see this, minimum value is now 2021. I cannot go older than 20. I cannot select any month older than June of 2021, right? Same way, max, you want to say 2022, let's just say 06, right? Then last 12 months, that's it, and these 12 months. So if you see 2021, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, and if you see 2022 till June, right? So that's how you select min and max. Again, we can also add required over here, and we can also default the value over here. Let's say we want to say, hey, by default we are more interested in kids born, superheroes born in this month. So 2022 March, and if you see, the March is 2022. Another attribute that we can add here is read only, which does what it says, right? It makes this field read only. So now you cannot change it, you cannot disable it, right? The use case for this field is this attribute is that sometimes you want to allow users to edit some info, let's say in their profile, but you don't want to edit some basic info. So let's say like I have my Gmail account, right? Now I can go in and change my first name, my last name, everything in Gmail, but I cannot change my email address in this account. I have to, it's fixed once it's created. So things like that. So you show the form, but you make the fields read only so that users can change it. It's just for users to see that, hey, this is the value over here. So let's remove this attribute because we want to keep it. Next, like for our superhero team, it's very important that we know how strong they are, right? So we want to tell us how strong they are. And how do we do that? So let's add a couple of line breaks for clarity. Let's add label for strength, right? And let's say, how strong are you? And we'll say input, type range, right? ID, it will be strength because we want to match it with the label. Name will be strength, STRENGT. Am I spelling it right? I hope I'm spelling it right. This is a coding class, not a spelling class. So don't worry. So like we said, right, the input is type range, so it gives you the slider control to select any different value. The documentation says that it returns a numeric value and it's not accurate, so you don't want to use it when you want to define something very specific. You want to use it for range objects only. So let's say something like, hey, what's your salary, right? No one asks, there are very few sites that ask for exact salary, but you want to give a range of salary, like it's been this and this, or what is your expenses, things like that, right? So, but how do you know what value it defines, right? We need to give it some more attributes to help us read the values out of it. So, as you might have guessed, the first is min, right? So we want a minimum value. Let's say minimum 0. You are the superhero is not strong at all. Max, let's say max is 100, right? And then next is step. What the step defines is like every time it moves, how much increment do we give to the range, right? So let's say 10. So now if we go here, now if you see, it doesn't move that smoothly because we have defined a step, and between the 0 and 100 there will be 10 steps, right? So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, right? So because of steps, now you can control the way user slides it. Without the step, it won't be as accurate as you want to. So if I remove this, right, refresh the page, Right? The slider is smooth, but it might not be accurate. So let's see what values do we get. If you want to read the value, let's do a 9 a.m. The problem with required is you have to fill in all the details now. 9 a.m. Okay, let's fancy inputs. Let's see strength 85. Right, so here it said strength 85, but if we had steps in, then our range would be like strength would be either 80 or 90. It won't say 85. So depending on how accurate you want your slider to be, you can either give steps, you can give more granular steps. So if I say step 1, right, let's see how it behaves here. Right, let's say now if I do this looks around 75 something. 9 a.m. again date 9 a.m. Okay, let's clear the network tab, click on submit. Now we'll see 81. See, oh, is it? It's not visible. Okay, let me disable my cam for a second. Okay, let me zoom in. Yeah, so you see this was the value submitted when we clicked on submit form, and the strength is 81 over here. So depending on how you set the step size is the granularity of the value that you'll get. So now we know their theme color, we know their audition date and time. Let's tell them to upload a picture, right? We want to make sure how they look. So we are going to do this. We are going to add again more line breaks. We are going to say input type. Can you guess what type is this for picture? I think you might have already seen it. Type file. Right. So here we are saying that, hey, in this case, we need a file from the user. We're going to say ID, avatar, name, avatar. Right, and we'll create a label for them. Let's go here, paste. Please upload your picture. Let's make it official. Please upload your passport photo. Upload your passport photo. And this one is for avatar. Let's see what does HTML do over here. All right, let's close this thing. So as you already seen, we added this new label. Oops. And we also added this new choose file. So whenever you say input type file, the browser knows that we need to choose a file, and we need to choose a file from user's machine. So it when you click on choose file, it opens this file explorer, and then you can select the file. But see, right now, if you see, it basically allows you to upload anything. You can upload PDF files, you can upload pictures, you can upload folders, zip files. We don't want that, right? We want to limit the users to certain types of file. So how would we do that? So in order to do that, there is an attribute called accept, which says what kind of files do we want to accept, and then we can say accept image PNG. Right? So this says we only want a file of type image, but only PNG images. So accept attribute accepts multiple values. So it can be a comma separated value. So you can say image PNG, image JPG, right? So we want PNG files, we want JPEG files, and that's it, nothing else. So now if you go here, let's refresh to be sure. If you go and choose files, see, it automatically hid all the other file types for us, right? So I can only select PNG and JPEG files, right? So for now, I'll just select this PNG file, and it prints the file name over here, right? The actual uploading, to actually see how the actual upload works, we also need a server supporting file uploads, right? So we'll look at that when we reach JavaScript and Node.js part of the course. But for now, just assume that once you choose the file and when you click on book my audition, it will automatically trigger the upload process for us. Okay. In reality, we are not uploading anything right now. So that now we know their theme, we know their audition date, we know their strength, and we have their avatar. What else? We need to contact them, right? We need a way to contact them. So let's add those details. Let's add a label for phone. Okay. Please enter your mobile number. Yeah, because superheroes, they rely a lot on mobile communication. The old days we used to have those lights to call Batman and all. Nowadays it's just a WhatsApp message. So now you just do input, type, and the type here is tel, TEL for telephone, and ID, phone, name, phone. Right. So let me open this in a different browser now, because during practice I realized something. So if you put this phone number over here, there's nothing new in the way the browser reacts right now. Let me zoom in. So this is your mobile number. You see there's no widget, there's no fancy stuff over here, but the type tel comes in handy in at least two places. One is browser autofill. So when you click on it, if you have any autofill settings saved, the browser will autofill your phone number over there. So it's very useful if users rely on autofill. Second, if you are opening this on mobile web, when you click on the field, the mobile will restrict your input to numbers only. So instead of showing this whole array of input, like all the alphabet, the keyboard and all, it just shows phone number input. So that way it's easier for users to enter your phone number. So it's there to improve user experience. In regular browser, it doesn't add any specific widget or anything, right? Same way. And the reason I didn't show it in the browser in my Chrome is because I have all my details saved. So if the moment I click on it, my phone number and everything is displayed over there. So privacy. 200 IQ. Same way, some of them, they also rely on email. So let's collect their email as well. We'll do the same pattern. Please enter your email. Right here, the type you might have guessed is email. Let's do ID is email. Oops. And label is email. Everything looks good. Let's go back over here. Again, it's the same thing. Oh yeah, here it works. If you see, I'm not sure how visible it is in the video. Or can I zoom in? Yes, I can. Yes. So if you see, the moment I clicked on enter your email, the input tag, it opened this suggestion box, right, with this email. Right. So if I'm relying on autofill, again, this is useful. If I click on this, I can just select and autofill my email over here. Also, again, in the mobile web, when you have this field set as email, the mobile can add special input variables to your keyboard, right? It can add the rate to your keyboard. It can autofill for you. So again, it's a feature that improves usability for our end users. But display wise, it doesn't add any specific tags or any specific widgets to the UI or in the regular browser. So that's your email. And for the let's enter all the values once, and then try and inspect and see how they look when we submit the form. So let's select. So let's say my theme color could be I'm an Iron Man fan, so let's do red. Right, my audition date, I'm going to audition tomorrow. Right, first thing in the morning. First thing, the moment you open, I'll be there. Right, again the same thing. First thing in the morning, you open, I'll be there. We are going to select all the same things. Okay, I am like super strong. Iron Man is super strong. I'll just select something random over here as a photo because we are not going to use it. This is my phone number, by the way, guys. If you want to text me, 999999999, that's my phone number. Let's inspect. Let's remove this. Let's go to network. And if you click on, okay, book on audition, it throws an error because I forgot something. Okay. This looks good. Now, let's click on book on audition. And there you go, right? Everything worked. Let's check our URL. I'm going to bring this up, make this bigger. And if you see, all the values here are not the exact values, right? If you see the color, it has this %23 and the color value. Date time has this weird % characters. Our email has this weird % character. Why is that? The reason for that is the request we are making, right? It also has, like, the values of this request are encoded so that the browser doesn't confuse it with different kinds. So for example, if you see our HTML value, I said we always get the value in hex code, right? It has a hash sign over here, but the browser URL can also have a hash sign which means something else, right? So what the browser does is, before sending the request, it encodes it in a way so that it's easier to send it to the server. Like over here, there are spaces. It encodes it and removes the spaces and adds plus in between so that the server can read and interpret the values correctly. So these are the encoded values, right? So how do you check? If ideally, like, you have a server application where you can decode them and compare the values, but for now there is also a URL encoder decoder. So if you go here, you paste the values here. If you click on decode, now if you see, we have these clear values. We have theme color, we have audition date time, we have audition date, audition time, audition month, strength 100, avatar, whatever this file I selected, phone 9999, and email this. So we got all the right values. It's just that in the network tab, it always shows encoded values, right? You can also see payload like this in the network. Like if you don't want to see the parameters here, you can also see like this. So yeah, query string parameters, those are the parameters that we saw on the URL, and it shows all the values over here. But the actual request going through has those encoded values. Yeah, see, yeah, we could do over here only. Yeah, so if you see encoded values, it's %23 whatever the value is. You see audition time and everything. But if you see decoded values, these are the actual values. So on the server, when we get the values, we decode them, then we store it in the database or do whatever we want with that. For all these elements, make sure, in fact, it's a good practice that whenever you are doing something with HTML, you want to think about your end users and what kind of browsers they might be using, and you want to make sure your input elements, your web page overall works as expected on all those browsers. So one thing you can do is you can select hey, these are the 3 browsers I'm supporting, let the users know, and then support those 3 browsers. If you can't do that, then you want to make sure you support it in as many browsers, like depending on the usage, as possible. So you can say, you can go to global browser usage, right? There's a page that shows you what's the browser market share right now, right? So yeah, so it says around whatever this is, around 80%, around 60%, right? Is Chrome. Let me zoom in more a bit. So around 60% is Chrome, and you can, this is August 2021. Can we do it later? Oh, it's over here. Okay. 62 is Chrome, 19 is Safari, 4 is Firefox, Edge, Samsung, and Opera. So between Chrome and Safari, if you make sure your website works as expected between these 2 browsers, you are already supporting around 70, I can't calculate, 20, yeah, around 80 to 82% of the users, right? 200 IQ. So you always want to make sure you do all these research and study before pushing to production, or as a best practice. The second thing I really wanted to talk to you guys about was HTML semantics. So what is semantics? So semantics basically give a meaning to your HTML page, to your HTML tags, right? And in most cases, it doesn't necessarily give any structure, like visual structural changes to the page, but it gives meaning, and why this meaning is important, right? So let's take an example. Let's create a new file, right? Again, at the wrong place. Let's create a new file here. Name it semantics.html, right? We'll use the what do we say? We'll just use this placeholder code to initiate the page. HTML semantics. Let's say we create a heading 1 tag. This is heading h1, right? This is h1. Works. Span. I know I haven't covered span yet, but we'll cover it in this section going forward, right? For now, we can use span to basically add some text in between. So even in the span, I'm going to say this is h1, and we are going to add some CSS. But if it's not clear, then don't worry. We will cover this in the next video for sure. But basically here, what we are doing is we are defining the span and we are giving it certain style, right? We are saying what the font size should be, what the margin around it should be, and what the font weight should be. Again, if it's not intuitive in this Go, don't worry. We are going to cover all these in detail in our CSS video, but for now, just assume this, right? Let's close this. Let's start our server again. And there you go. So now if you see the heading tag and the span, they both look exactly the same, right? There's no difference here. And the reason is because we added styles to it. And this is the reason why I wanted to cover semantics before we went into CSS. Was with CSS, you can basically change the look and feel of any HTML element and make it behave like a different element. But we shouldn't do that. And the reason for that is first of all, accessibility. So like I said, the semantic the meaningful HTML elements help with accessibility, especially when the users are using screen readers, and the screen reader can then understand which part of the text is heading, which part of the text is second level heading, or which is a paragraph, things like that. And second, search engine optimization. So search engine optimization is when you create your web page, you design it in a way, you implement it in the way that search engines like Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, they bring if your page is relevant, they bring it to the top of the results. So normally for search results, if your page is not in, let's say, top 10 search results, people don't normally go there. So you want your website to look differently. You want your website to be optimized so that if people are searching for irrelevant terms, your web page and your website comes up. Right? So that is search engine optimization. So in search engine optimization, the engines, they look at your HTML code and then they differentiate, hey, this code has different headings, this code has articles related to this particular topic, this code has this navigation bar, whatever, right? And they rank your page accordingly. So it's really good for that as well. So in this section, I wanted to just go through some semantic HTML tags, right? And in most of the tags, you'll see that they don't help with the way the page renders, but more or less they just give meaning to the tags. So let's start with that. So I'm going to comment this out for now, and we are going to start with the first one. So the first one is header tag, right? This is a header, but do not confuse this with h1 or this header tag. Let me zoom in. Yeah. Do not confuse this with h1 or this header tag. And the reason is this header basically represents your document header. So let's first see the HTML for this. So if you see the text over here, there's nothing specific. It feels like a regular text. Even if you add it in a span or a paragraph, it looks like this. But the difference is this header defines the document header. And what do I mean by that? So if you go to any website, right, let's go to Google News, you'll see this website is divided into few sections. So on the top where we have this Google News, there is this header with the search bar, with the login details, right? There is a navigation part on the left where you have all the links to different sections, right? There is a footer where it says privacy terms about Google and all that. There is this sidebar with some fact-checked info, and there is this main section. Right, so most of the general, if you go to Facebook, if you go to Twitter, you'll see that all the websites have this similar layout where there's a heading, there's a footer, there's a header, there's a footer, there's main content, navigation, all those things. So it's a good idea to give these parts of the website some meaning, so that, like I said, it's good for SEO, it's good for accessibility, and also it helps with code maintainability. So as you grow, right, if you work in big companies, it won't be just you creating a website. There'll be like 5, 6, 7 developers working on a web application, and over the time these developers rotate, right? People move, new people come in. So you want to make sure your code is clean, your code is readable, your code is easily understandable for the next person to come in. So again, HTML semantics also helps with that. It helps you create clean, understandable code for anyone to come in and jump in. So that's where this header comes in. So anything that you want to add to your header, you can define it within this header tag, right? So your search bar, your login, your even in some cases your navigation, everything goes into this header. Also, let's do this. Let's also look at the examples as we go. So let's inspect our Google News website, and when you go to inspect, when you go to elements, you can do Control F and then you can search for header. So let's see. Yes. So if you see this, Google is also using this header tag. If you select this, the tag on the top, it gets selected. If you see the web page, now there's a blue color over the header, showing that this is the tag we selected. Right? So it's like I said, all the things that go on the top of your website, on the head of your website, it's very confusing to explain header when there's a head tag and a heading tag. But this is the header of your web page, right? So anything that goes on the top, it goes inside the header. Since if you open this, there'll be, let's say, another element. Let's dig deeper. We're going to cover div also in this section, so don't worry if you understand. See, there's one div with Google News, there's one div with the search, there's another div with the login info and the apps button and everything, right? So even there's a header tag over here. Next, let's go to the next semantic HTML tag called main. So as the name suggests, see, now this is getting easier to understand. Main, what does main have? Main, any content that's the main content of your web page should go inside the main tags, right? So let's say your websites have blogs, right? So the main content of the blog or the list of blogs or whatever it represents should go inside the main. In this case, again, let's explore this. Let's search for, so in case of Google, here you see there's a main HTML tag. And if you see the blue area on the web page itself, it shows that the main headlines, the main section where you show the headlines is the main content of this page. So it goes under the main tags. Next, Let's just add some text over here. This is main content. Next we have article. Again, now from the name itself you can judge, right, what this could be. So anything in your web page that is reusable, right, it's self-contained, it goes into article, right? So like your blog posts, your if let's say you have a Amazon like website, like you are in e-commerce, right? So your each product in your search, everything that everything like that goes into article. And let's see again. Let's visit this Google News site. If you search for article, like we guessed, right? So the main headline, like for the news, is first article. Then there are this div. If you open this div, there are other articles. So each news headline, they are treating it as an article. And there is no exact definition on when to use that. So whenever you are creating a website, you need to think about which kind of semantic tag you want to use, right? Do you want to use article here? Do you want to use div here? Or there is one more called section. This is a section. So section is again a very generic semantic tag. In my research, I couldn't find any exact definition on what to use inside section. My approach is that if I can't find any other semantic tag, and if I have to use semantic tag, I might group that those tags under section. But along with section, I can also use other tags. So it's very generic. It depends on use case to use case. I know my information is very vague here, but whenever you are developing a website, you want to look up and see what are the recommended practice at that time. And let's also take a quick look at our own website. So if you see our Semantics website, all this content, they look the same, right? There's no difference on how header looks or how main content looks or how article looks. And the reason is these HTML tags are not meant to change the structure of the web page or change the way a web page looks, but to give more meaning to the web page, right? So when you're designing a web page, you don't want to think them from the point of view of UI design, but you want to think about them from the point of view of accessibility, SEO, and code maintainability. So next, let's talk about now. So now is short form for navigation. Again, you might have guessed, any links that we add to our website, any links that allow users to navigate from point A to point B on your web page, should be the part of navigation. So normally in most web applications that I've seen so far, all your navigation is grouped together in one spot in your UI. Either it's a navigation left bar, or a top navigation bar, or a pop-up from the app section like we have in Google, right? So this is navigation. You can add like your anchor tags over here, right? Let's go to fancy inputs, right? If you remember, we covered anchor tag last time. We can add a link, we can add a href over here and say, oh, take me to fancy inputs.html. If you see the page, again, visually it doesn't make any difference, right? It just says this is navigation and this is fancy inputs. Visually, if you want to make difference here, you'll need to add CSS, which we are going to do in next section. So let's explore again Google News and see if it has navbar. I don't think. Okay, so Google has an exclusive navigation bar, but they are not using semantic tag over there. They are just using role navigation. I'm not sure what this attribute is in this case. Maybe some proprietary attribute. Let's go inside and see if in case they have something nested. I doubt it. I don't think so. Yeah, just the anchor tag. So like I said, it doesn't affect the functionality. It doesn't affect how it looks. It's the best practice that we should all follow. It shouldn't come in as an afterthought, right? So in this case, yeah, we don't have the navbar, but ideally, I think it would just work if you just do this, right? So I just change the element locally, and I think the website still looks as it is. So I'm assuming even a navbar can work here as expected. Next, let's talk about details. Oops, not data list. Details element. So again, you might have guessed, right? This is the awesomeness of semantic HTML. You might have guessed what this element is. This element basically helps you create a detail list or a summary detail view of your data. This particular one does change the way your HTML looks. So how can you do that? You can do summary, and let's say I'll do summary in me, and then you can do UL. You can do summary, and then you can add, let's say I want to, the details, I just want to list things about me, right? And we'll see the behavior in a minute. So let's say software engineer, right? Game streamer. Let's add one more. Coding teacher. Although I'm not sure if I'm actually teaching anything, or so I'll just say person who talks about coding and software engineer in general who doesn't know when to end an example. Right? So the way this UI element works is it shows you the summary unless you click on the element to and it shows you the details. So let's go back to our semantic HTML. So if you see right now, it just shows Gaurang Dave. Oh, yeah, it just shows Gaurang Dave. But if I click on it, it shows rest of the details. So this is like one of the few HTML, sorry, I misspoke. So this is the semantic HTML tag that actually makes a difference. So come to think about it, your paragraph tag, your heading tag, all those are also part of semantic HTML tags, right? Because they do change the way it looks. Not all semantic HTML tag will just be there to add the meaning, but there are these specific ones which are just there to add the meaning. So since we add a header, we can also add a footer. Right, so footer is generally, if you see in many websites, there is this footer which has copyright info, which has links to other parts of the web page, like terms and conditions, links to change locales, things like that, right? So anything that is like that you want to show at the foot of your website, you show it in the footer. Again, the advantage here is whenever let's say users are using screen reader for accessibility, the screen reader will know that, hey, this is a footer, it is not an important part of the web page, so it might not read out loud, or it might read out accordingly. It might say this is the footnotes on your web page, right? So this is a footer. If you see, this won't change the way it renders, it just renders whatever there is whatever elements we have in this footer. We can add or nest more elements there, but it gives a meaning to that part. Again, let's see if this guy has a footer. There you go. So it has a footer. If you hover over it, it shows that, see, privacy terms about Google, right? Those are the footer links that they wanted to add. They added it as a footer in the navbar itself. Right, so now depending on your design, you can have a footer in the navbar, you can have a footer on the main page. This doesn't define anything. It just says if you are creating any info or any data as a part of your footer, you should name it as footer. So yeah, footer is like the end of the page, right? Which also brings us to the end of this section. So the reason I wanted to talk about semantics before going forward was especially this. Like once you start learning about CSS, you'll find it's very easy to use CSS to modify the look and feel of HTML elements and We want to make sure we use the elements in the right way. We want to make sure we use the CSS in the right way and not confuse those two. And second reason was for CSS, while learning, it's easier to use these two generic HTML elements. Let me also cover that, right? One is this called div tag. This is a div tag, right? Div here stands for division. Basically, it doesn't divide anything, but basically, well, actually it divides. It actually, with the div tag, you can nest all your elements together and you can divide them into different sections on your page, right? And another is span tag, right? It's also used to group and group HTML elements so that you can apply same styles to those. But one of more common use cases to group content together. So for example, let's say I have this paragraph. This is my awesome paragraph. Oops. Right? But let's say in the second part of the line, I want to add some styles to it. If you remember, we were adding strong HTML element to show the fonts in bold. Let's say you want to add different fonts to it. How would you differentiate between that? You can't keep on adding paragraph tags because paragraph should represent a paragraph. So what you can do is you can add a span tag over here and say this is a differently style element of my paragraph, right? So now we can use CSS and say, hey, style this span differently. Again, I promise we are going to cover that in the next section, next video. But we will be using these two tags more in the examples, and I want to make sure we understand what's the difference between different HTML tags. And as long as it is possible, we don't want to use div tags. We don't want to use div tags to, let's say, create a header on a HTML page, or we don't want to use span tag to create navigation section, things like that, right? So that's why it's very important to understand HTML semantic tags. It's very important to understand its use cases, and very important to use them correctly to make our sites more welcoming, more accessible, more inclusive, right? So having said that, that was it for today. I think this covers a majority of HTML elements in last couple of videos. There are still one more HTML element that I'm really excited about, but I don't want to cover it till I cover JavaScript and CSS, and then we are going to make some games out of it. So I'm really excited about that. I really hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, please consider liking the video. It really helps me. It really helps with the channel. If you want to learn more, do subscribe. We are also going to cover far more advanced topics going forward. And if you have any feedback, don't forget to comment and leave that for me. And I'll see you all next time. Till then, adios, take care, stay safe, bye.